Hey friends, it's RSKT, and welcome back to another installment of the Deluge Video Manual, where I'll be showing you pretty much everything I know about using the Synthstrom Deluge. In the last video, we took a look at the subtractive synth that's built into the Deluge, and in this video, we're going to be having a look at FM synthesis. FM stands for frequency modulation, and it's just another form of synthesis that we have available to us for creating really cool sounds. Now, FM is actually really good for creating like really metallic sounds like bells or pipes and things like that. But you can also create a lot of other beautiful sounds with it as well. And also some really nasty ones, which is a lot of fun. Now, I'm not going to lie here. When I first got the Deluge, I kind of avoided the FM engine like the plague because even though I became quite used to using other FM synths, I found the FM synth on the Deluge quite hard to get my head around. I think that's partly due to just the way that the interface is set up for the Deluge. It's not particularly hard once you understand it, and I definitely don't think that it is as robust as other FM synths that you can get, but it's still a really nice option to have and affords us a lot more creativity. Now, unlike subtractive synths where we basically sort of have a few oscillators to choose from and then chip away at that with filters and effects, FM synth is more about having an oscillator or an operator and generating an initial basic waveform known as a carrier. This then has its frequency modulated at a really fast rate by modulators, and it sort of adds on like more harmonics and richness to the sound. And yeah, it's a lot of fun to mess around with. You'll see what a lot of this terminology means as we go through the video, but it's trying to give you a general overview for what you're getting into. I think it's worth noting that on a lot of other synths, the exact configuration of where you have your operators and your carriers and modulators and all that, and how they're set up and routed into one another, that's known as an algorithm. And a lot of other synths just have some options available to you where you can switch between one of many different algorithms available to you to sort of manipulate the sound or have it changed on an instant because you've changed the routing of how things are set up. On the Deluge, we don't have that. There is no way to just press a button and change the algorithm on a whim. So we need to create our own algorithms, and there are 8 available to us in total. If you have a look in the actual Deluge manual, there is a diagram that shows you these 8, but I'm going to take you through step by step and how we can do that a little bit later on. Another thing that I think is important to point out is that FM synth is kind of like just applying a lot of really, really fast vibratos to different parts of your sound. And, the faster that vibrato is happening, or the more frequently that it is happening, it sounds like it's going higher or lower in pitch to our ears. So the Deluge uses 2 carriers and 2 FM modulators. However, you're still able to apply regular modulation with your LFOs and envelopes and so on and so forth, just like we did in the subtractive engine. So let's dive in and have a look at how all of this works. I'm going to press Shift and Synth to create a new synth. And then I'm going to press Shift and Synth mode, and we'll change it to FM. So by default, we have this. A basic sine wave. So oscillator 1 is a carrier, and oscillator 2 is also a carrier, but just like in the subtractive synth, it's turned down by default. We can turn it up if we want, but we're not really going to hear much difference because we've just got 2 sine waves playing next to each other. Now, if you start flicking around some of these options, you'll notice that we can still transpose these sounds. But a lot of the other options are going to tell you can't. So if we go to type, can't, pulse width modulation, can't, so on and so forth. So you might find that there's a few things you can't do with FM, but we'll sort of address each one of those as they pop up. One thing you can do, however, is change the feedback. So if I press Shift and feedback, just remember this option wasn't available to us in the subtractive synth menu. If I press feedback and start to turn it up, basically we're going to start modulating the oscillator's frequency with itself, and it'll become its own modulation signal. So have a listen. If we turn this up all the way, Now we basically have a saw wave. If we place that down, went back into song view, and started a new subtractive synth, and changed the synth type to be a saw wave, they're pretty similar. Going to delete that one and go back into our FM synth. So yeah, basically changing the feedback or how much we're modulating the oscillator with itself, it's going to add on more harmonics to our sine wave, and eventually that's going to turn into a saw wave. I'm just going to turn this all the way back down. So now we're back to having a sine wave. Now, I did point this out in the last video, but I'm just going to point it out here. If we trigger this over and over again, you might hear a little bit of popping at the start of the signal. We can go to Retrig Phase and start to turn this, and you'll notice that pop goes away. Just something to keep in mind, because the Retrig Phase sort of seems to play a little bit of a role in the attack of the sound. I'm probably using the wrong terminology there, but it's good to keep in mind. Also, if we switch this back to off and we introduced a second oscillator and had a listen, we'll notice that sometimes the sound is cutting out when I'm pressing it. So again, if we change the Retrig phase, so that's starting slightly later, maybe on this one too. Now we're not really getting that. Basically, you don't really want your sound waves to cut each other out. I'm just mainly pointing this out because as you're working through this engine, you might sometimes find that sound seems to be dipping in and out, and that's one way that you can go about combating that. Just going to set that to off. We'll turn off our second oscillator. Now, one thing that you're going to find with the FM engine is that we don't have access to frequency or resonance. We cannot use the filter. But that's okay because we can still shape the sound to be the way that we want it to be. So under here, we can see that we have FM mod 1 and FM mod 2. These are our modulators. So if I were to select FM mod 1 and start to turn it up, not only is the sound changing, you'll notice that this golden knobs bars are lighting up. So if we look next to our cutoff frequency word here, we can also see FM, and FM is also printed next to resonance. So basically, these two knobs are acting as our two FM modulators under here. So we don't actually need to press Shift and Select to get into these. We can just use these top knobs. So for this particular sound, let's turn up FM mod 1. And if we have a look at transpose, we can see that transpose actually goes all the way across to the FM mod section. Now, pressing transpose and changing the transposition of an FM mod is actually going to change its rate. Have a listen. So we can hear that going up and down. Now, you'll notice that per octave, we're getting some sweet spots as well. Have a listen to that. Starts to sound quite dissonant. In the middle doesn't sound too bad, but once we get to 12, we'll be back to where we want. FM really works well with finding those sweet spots, but you can also have a lot of fun and come up with some really interesting sounds diving out of those sweet spots as well. Hey, sorry to interrupt here. There's just one thing that I forgot to mention, and I've only realized that while I'm editing this video together. And I just want to take a really quick moment to talk about ratios. So the world of FM synthesis can definitely produce a lot of really unpredictable sounds, and you'll find as you're dialing in different modulation frequencies that you're going to get some pretty abrasive noise. But there are definitely sweet spots that you can dial your sound into, and these are kind of known as ratios. Now, on a lot of other FM synths, these ratios are kind of a lot easier to access and dial into. But on the Deluge, just like how I'm going to be talking about the different algorithms later, you need to dial these ratios in manually. The way that you do that is to transpose each of the frequency modulators into a specific zone. This zone is going to essentially become a multiple of the carrier, and learning what each of these zones kind of sounds like can make it a lot easier to help you anticipate what sort of sound you're going to be creating. Essentially, a good rule of thumb is to remember that the higher the ratio, the more complex harmonics are going to be introduced into your sound. And moving into the zone of the higher ratios is going to help you create a lot of those sort of bell and glassy textures that FM is really known for. Now, fortunately, we don't have to guess our way through these. In the Deluge official manual on page 316, there's a small table which has these ratios mapped out for us. And I'm going to bring it up onto the screen now. So on the left-hand side, we can see the ratios that are 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, and so on, all the way up to 1 to 12. And over on the right-hand side, we can see the semitones and synths that we need to alter on the frequency modulator transposition control. So if we were to transpose frequency modulation 1 up by 12 semitones, we're going to get a ratio of 1 to 2, which is going to bring you something similar to a square wave. But as we go higher and higher, that square wave is going to become more and more complex with a lot more harmonics introduced. If we wanted a ratio of 1 to 3, we need to move it up to 19 semitones and 2 cents. So we're going to have to scroll over and just bump up that 2 cents. And you'll hear as you dial these in that the sound becomes a lot less dissonant and starts to really harmonize together in a really nice sounding way. Now, obviously, these numbers are a lot to remember, and you don't have to remember them. You can just use your ears and sort of dial it in as close as you can get, because usually your ears can pick up on it pretty easily. But if you wanted a good jumping off point, just remember the ratios of 1 to 2, 1 to 4, and 1 to 8, because they're just whole numbers, and then you can start learning some of the decimal values later on. I wouldn't be too put off by learning this. It's definitely worth taking the time, just like when you would have learnt subtractive synthesis for the very first time. I'm sure a lot of my viewers who even watched the subtractive synth video already had a little bit of an understanding of what square waves and sine waves were, and pulse width modulation and all of that sort of stuff. And this is just like learning a completely different form of synthesis. So the more you practice it, the more comfortable you're going to be, and the easier it's going to be for you to create some really unique and powerful sounds out of the FM synth engine and have them add to your song. So yeah, anyways, that's pretty much all I had to add in there. Hope that is helpful. Let's get back to the video. Now, if you remember when we clicked feedback, we were feeding the oscillator back into itself. We can also do that with the frequency modulator. And you have that available for frequency mod 2 as well. So far we've looked at being able to introduce 2 oscillators, use 2 frequency modulators, and change the feedback of all of those, as well as transpose these oscillators up and down and transpose the rate of the frequency modulators. Playing around with these can get you some really, really cool sound, so let's just have a little fiddle and see what we can come up with. I'm going to introduce the second oscillator, and I'm going to transpose it down. Maybe up. We could go over in synths if we wanted to. Let's change the feedback. And we'll play around with the FM modulation. Great. Now we still have our envelopes available to us. So if we turn the sustain of this all the way down, the decay, and the release up, it's kind of like a harpsichord in a way. We could even apply a little bit of pitch modulation using the second envelope. Now we can get something completely different altogether. Maybe we want to spin that in the other direction. So yeah, very, very metallic sounding and everything. I'm just going to go Shift and New and enter in the FM synth again. Just introduce the second one and play around with these a bit more. So yeah, lots and lots of fun to be had with frequency modulation. Now, it's also worth noting that you can change the destination of where frequency mod 2 goes. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's start a bit of a different sound. Great. So what I can do is up here we can see destination. Now if I press shift destination over FM mod 1, it's going to say soon. That usually means that Synthstrom have that planned for a future update, but we can't confirm that. However, if we go over one above frequency mod 2 and press destination, we can choose if we want this to affect the carrier, which are, our oscillators down here, or if we want it to affect frequency mod 1. So have a listen to the difference. So now twisting this is affecting frequency mod 1. Also, don't forget that we can map these frequency modulators to LFOs if we want as well, and start getting some really zany results. I love making really strange noise like that. It's so much fun. I can get lost in it for days. So definitely have a little bit of a play around with a lot of these. You might find that you make particularly ugly noise for a while, but over time you'll start to realize that there are different sweet spots, especially when you're just jumping between the octaves of these transpose controls and only applying a tiny bit of frequency modulation. For example, you can make this sound kind of pretty out of the gate. Just by applying a tiny bit of release. Yeah. Now, I mentioned at the start that there are different algorithms that we can set up. And we've kind of been doing that all along. I'm going to try and display some graphics on the screen. So maybe I'll flash one up right now for us all to look at. These are the 8 algorithms that we're going to be creating. And you can see that it's just routing things to different directions. So for this, I'll just press Shift and Synth. And we'll change synth mode to FM and start from scratch. So obviously the first algorithm is just having the single carrier. And we can change the feedback to feed that back into itself and modulate itself. The second algorithm is to have modulation 1 affecting the first carrier. Remember, we can do that with this top select knob when it's on the filter cutoff section. The third algorithm is to have modulator 1 and 2 affecting carrier 1, or our first oscillator. And the fourth algorithm is to have FM mod 2 affecting FM mod 1, which is affecting the carrier. So the way we would set that up is to press Shift and destination over FM mod 2. We'll change that to mod 1, so now it is affecting FM mod 1. And we'll start to turn up FM mod 1, which is affecting our carrier. And this is affecting FM mod 1. This is FM mod 2. You can kind of hear as we're going up here that the higher we go with these values, the more metallic it is sounding. But just having these on subtly can make some really nice results. So I'm going to turn those off and we'll set the destination back to carrier. And now it's important to keep in mind that we've pretty much done all of the algorithms. It's just that the next 4 are the same thing, but introducing a second carrier into the mix. So there's really not too much to remember here. Yes, there are 8 algorithms, but 4 of them are kind of just the same as the other 4, but with a second carrier. Either way, we're still going to go through them. So right now we just have 1 carrier. The 5th algorithm would be to introduce a second carrier. Just turn it up all the way. Great. And we can use the feedback controls again if we wanted to have them modulate themselves. The 6th algorithm is to have our first frequency modulator modulating carrier 1 and 2. So we just turn this up, or remember, we can use the top gold knob. The 7th algorithm would be modulator 1 and 2 affecting carrier 1 and 2. So we just need to turn these modulators up. Great. And finally, the 8th algorithm is to have frequency modulation 2 affecting frequency modulation 1, which is in turn affecting these 2 carriers. So all we need to do for that, remember, is to go to FM mod 2, up to destination, switch this from carrier to mod 1, and now mod 2 is affecting mod 1, which is affecting these 2 carriers. So as I said before, the final 4 algorithms out of the total of 8 algorithms available to us, pretty much the same as the first 4. We're just introducing a second carrier into the mix. So yeah. Don't forget to play around with using different envelopes and modulation options when you're using the FM synth. And even just a basic sound design session can yield some really interesting results. For example, maybe we just want to up the release of this one. We can introduce some attack as well. Just going to shift the Retrig phase of this one. Great. So maybe one thing we want to do is we're still using algorithm number 8 here. Yep. So maybe we want to map the FM mod 2 to an LFO. Just a little bit. And let's turn down the rate of the LFO. Maybe we want FM mod 1 to be modulated by envelope 2. And we'll make the attack of that all the way to 0 and the decay a little bit longer. Awesome. So let's lay out that chord. And we'll play around with some of the feedback options and the transpose options of these. We can make the sound even larger by doing what we did in the subtractive synth video and upping up the number of voices. Pitch it down an octave. If the treble's too much, we can just turn that down with the EQ. And turn the bass up a little bit. Add some reverb. Lots of fun to be had with the FM synth engine. Finally, I did demonstrate this in the subtractive synth engine as well, but we can also use FM synths in kit tracks. So let's just delete these two for now. Oh yeah, we'll just make a new one and then delete the old one. Great, we'll switch this to a kit track and we want to go new kit, and we'll just jump straight back out of the browser. So now we have an empty kit row available to us, and we're going to hold the audition pad and press synth. Now we can change the synth mode to be FM. Great. From there, we might want to synthesize some drum sounds. So as a really quick example, and again, just like the other video, this might be kind of dodgy, but we'll map the transpose to envelope 2. Great, we'll change the decay of that. And change the sustain. Let's introduce a second carrier. Cool, and let's transpose the first carrier down an octave. Maybe down a second octave. Great. Now we could play around with the feedback a little. I can give it a little bit of crunch at the start if we apply it to the one that's got the pitch modulation on it. Cool. And then we could play around with the frequency modulation, but I don't think it's going to do us much good in the kick department. What I might do is apply a little bit of saturation. So yeah, I don't want to get too carried away on this because if you work it right, you can really make decent kicks out of FM synths. But you know, from there you can start placing down your kicks, and yeah. Don't forget that because FM is quite metallic, we could even make some really unique cymbal sounds as well. So for example, we'll press audition pad and synth again. Change the synth mode to be FM. And let's apply some modulation. We'll decrease the sustain and up the release. Maybe introduce some feedback. And if we wanted, we could just bring in the second carrier. Let's transpose that up an octave. Then we could even play around with the destination. So let's just throw one of those in. And then, you know, we could do something like map decay to random. If we set the polyphony to be mono, they're going to cut each other off every time they're triggered. Apply some more saturation on this bass. Yeah, kind of crap, I know. But, you know, it's more about the idea of having fun and just seeing where FM can take you. It can take you to a lot of really strange places. You can make some awesome drone sounds out of it, awesome metallic sort of drum sounds, lots of plucks and sort of stringed instruments, banjos and harpsichords. There's so much on offer here with just the subtractive and the FM synth alone. You know, you could get lost for years in just exploring this stuff. As I've said countless times already, I am definitely hoping to do a video in the workflow section, kind of after the manual is all complete. We're going to go over sort of using the synth engines and going over a few different synth recipes so that you can create your own sounds the way you want them to be heard. But for now, I'm pretty sure that I have covered just about everything there is about the FM synth engine. And I hope that it has been of some use to some of you out there. Don't be like me and ignore the FM synth like I did for so long when I got the Deluge. It's actually a lot of fun, and yeah, you should experiment with it. Anyways, that's all I have time for today, guys. Hit the like if you like, and if you don't, tell me why. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.